Can I ask you something? What do you think of Lady Hawk?
Oh, yeah, that's terrible.
Among the slate of Disney Plus Marvel shows in 2021, Hawkeye is the most unusual. It's the outlier not because it's weird or cosmic, but because it's precisely the opposite. This is the most grounded Marvel Cinematic Universe fare of the year, and yet, despite its lack of seismic shifts for the multiverse, Hawkeye is the most successful of all these shows, thanks to its narrower focus and confident balancing of familiar elements. Hawkeye is Marvel giving us what it first did to make us fall in love with the MCU, a fun tale of superheroes just saving the day, with some interpersonal depth hiding not too far beneath the surface. Most of that depth comes courtesy of Jeremy Renner's Clint Barton. Surprise, the dullest Avenger is finally given a personality. No longer pushed to the sidelines by bolder Avengers, we find that Barton is a surprisingly downbeat man struggling to deal with his past traumas, particularly the tragedy of losing his best friend Natasha Romanoff. Hawkeye deals with this using a gentle, understanding hand. Renner carries this admirably, often hiding the weight of Clint's issues behind his eyes while being a little more stoic with the rest of his body. I'd stop short of saying Renner makes Clint an essential Avenger in Hawkeye, but here he has the space to be notably more complex than he's ever been. Unlike in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, this heavier side never becomes the focal issue of Hawkeye, which ensures the 6-episode run doesn't feel like an extended therapy session. The darkness is always there, but only in the shadows. Instead, Hawkeye's main interests lie broadly in being a fun superhero detective show. Clint's mission is to deal with the Tracksuit Mafia, a gang of Eastern European gangsters with a shadowy boss only ever referred to as the big guy. This framework means Hawkeye is always digging for the next clue or link, which results in fun reveals each episode.
Not Kate Bishop.
Kate Bishop is guy, bro.
Kate Bishop is not Guy.
Kate Bishop is guy in costume.
Wow. Can I speak to your manager?
The investigation angle also means Hawkeye is a little lighter on action, but when Clint does draw his bow, it's frequently exciting and energetically directed. His reliance on trick arrows works for impressive spectacle and a little childlike wonder. Missiles that spray goo or electrocute baddies feel like cool Christmas toys, and those are just the most pedestrian examples. That box of toys tone is matched by the condition in which Clint walks away from his fights. Cuts and scrapes emphasize that Clint is only human and not a super soldier or Asgardian god, but little montages of him patching himself up and strapping ice packs to his aching bones is always done with a smile. Detective stories do, of course, frequently pair a rough-and-tumble investigator with a fresh-faced, eager partner. Enter Kate Bishop, played to goofy perfection by Hailee Steinfeld. She effortlessly embodies the good-natured, thrill-seeking character of the comics, and so feels the most pulled from the page of any of Hawkeye's elements. Having idolized Clint since childhood, Kate has grown up to become an incredible archer and wannabe superhero, although her skills in the former vastly outweigh the latter, at least to begin with. Kate's rookie nature means she's constantly getting into trouble, embroiling herself in sinister plots far above her level in the name of trying to do a little good for the world. This naivety forces Clint to reluctantly take Kate on as a student, which gives birth to one of the most enjoyable double acts in the entire MCU.
Come on!
You're a Hawkeye.
And who the hell are you?
This is a different form of partnership compared to most in the MCU though. Where usually Marvel puts together big, contrasting personalities that grind each other's gears to produce quip-laden sparks, Clint and Kate have a far more naturalistic relationship. They couldn't be more different, but Hawkeye's writing team never forces them into loud confrontations or overinflates any of their personality quirks. And so while there is a surrogate father-daughter dynamic going on, they mostly come across like a couple of friends. This makes the pair genuinely enjoyable to watch, particularly when they're just hanging out and learning to appreciate each other's company. As for what they bring out in each other, it's not what I initially expected. The usual teacher-student setup involves the mentor also learning plenty from their prodigy, but Kate doesn't impart all that much wisdom to Clint. She's too busy telling him to brighten up his brand and embody the superhero ideal. And while this does aid in Clint gradually taking some pride in work he's become jaded about, much of his self-repair comes from his own convictions. Hawkeye's introspective layer is very much about learning to cope with and heal from your own personal trauma. Clint's relationship relationship with Kate and his own family work as supporting structures for this, but his journey is very much one of his own making. As a story of the power of self-healing and reframing your view of yourself, it's surprisingly successful, even if it always feels as if it's going on in the corners rather than center stage. Also kept to the corners are the Christmas vibes. Despite being advertised as a holiday show, Hawkeye doesn't actually lean into all that many festive tropes. More lights, Santas and snow would have granted Hawkeye a unique feel that would have perfectly complemented Kate's energetic, goofy nature and emphasized the fun of the duo's escapades. Instead, Christmas time is more of a backdrop and framing device. Clint is stuck in New York City fighting against the tracksuit mafia when he'd really rather be at home with his family. This adds a certain amount of tension to the whole season. Will our exasperated dad make it home in time for the main event? But it never feels like an important part of Hawkeye's identity. It does, however, mean we get plenty of festive needle drops, and that's nothing to grumble about. Threatening to cancel Christmas is Maya, a senior member of the tracksuit mafia who has a very particular vendetta to settle with Clint. Played by Alaqua Cox, both character and actor are deaf, which provides a little common ground between Maya and Clint, who is shown to now require a hearing aid thanks to his literally explosive career. Wisely, Hawkeye makes deafness an aspect of their personalities, but not their defining elements. Maya is instead characterized by her anger, which fuels some memorably violent run-ins with Clint, and her relationship with fellow mafia member Kazi. As with Kate and Clint, Maya and Kazi's relationship is remarkably understated for a Marvel show. While I appreciate that Hawkeye's villains don't feel like spandex-clad inmates leaping out of the pages of a comic book, the downplaying of any tropes is perhaps a little too much, and so we're left with characters who, as far as personality goes, don't leave a strong impression. But while Hawkeye lacks a little oomph in its villain department, not including a particular reveal in the final act, which is genuinely exciting, its simplified approach ensures it is not overburdened. Unlike WandaVision and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Hawkeye does not attempt to balance a dozen plates laden with grand ideas. Instead, it plays straight and focused, much like the arrows in Clint's quiver. And by not overreaching, Hawkeye remains remarkably consistent where its peers wobble, particularly in the final act when deep-seated plot threads begin to pay off. It makes for a highly satisfying finale that, while not having a grand impact on the MCU, provides a fitting conclusion for its characters. Hawkeye isn't about big ideas around the multiverse and breaking the next piece of ground for Marvel. It's about doing good by its characters, and it definitely lands a bullseye on that target. Hawkeye is a straightforward and conventional superhero story compared to its more ambitious Disney Plus Marvel peers. But that restraint proves to be its most valuable asset, as it never struggles under the weight of its ideas, allowing it to confidently sail through 6 well-paced chapters and build to a largely satisfying conclusion. Propelling that journey is the fun partnership between Clint Barton and Kate Bishop, whose street-level antics make Hawkeye an energetic romp. That's carefully balanced with a more introspective layer that lightly but successfully analyzes the physical and mental toll life as an Avenger can take. It all fits together in a recipe that's Marvel 101, hugely entertaining with a side of honest emotion. Following that formula also means, like many Marvel projects, it suffers from underwhelming villains, despite some fun surprises. It's not enough to knock Hawkeye off target though, and it easily succeeds in being the most consistently great of all the MCU's new TV shows. It might not be weird, surprising, or redefining, but with a central dynamic as great as this, it doesn't need to be. For the full written review with more thoughts, head over to IGN.com. If you want more from Hawkeye, take a look at an Archer expert analysing Clint and Kate's skills. And for everything else, stick with IGN.